Hey, Alex here from Blacksheep IT Consulting. In this no-code along, we are going to investigate what is the easiest way, without any code, to update a parent record. So in this screen, it's the service request as a parent. When a child record is, well, let's say created or updated. And that means update a parent when a child gets modified. So activities here as the example, child entity. So let's put it to test what happens in vanilla Siebel. So let's check out first on the parent. We check out the last updated date, which is here May 7th of this year. Okay, so that was in May, was the last update. And here's an activity I've just created. And let's update the status on this activity to scheduled. And let's save, make sure we save that explicitly. And of course, that one gets a last updated timestamp as of today, right? So with the timestamp and all. But what happened to the parent? The parent is still, well, it hasn't received any update, so the date has not changed. So, and that's exactly what our fictitious customer wants. They want to have, well, the parent updated every time a child gets updated. It's a very common requirement, I would think, because it makes sense. So if you have a kind of header record, think of an order header, a quote header, or let's say even a contact or account. When there's any movement in the hierarchy, adding children, even removing, which is another option, or updating child records, you would want the parent to be updated. So you can, for example, export it, send it to an external system, and so forth. So it would make sense to implement that. And the implementation that I will do is a no-code solution using Siebel Workflow. And it shows in a surprisingly transparent manner how Siebel Workflow really works. So we jump into Siebel Web Tools, and I've already created a developer workspace, so I can start creating, well, a workflow process. Let's call this BCRM update SR. Let's, for lack of a better name, pick a project, and most importantly, pick the business object. So the business object in this case is, of course, service request. So there's no doubt. So you would think, okay, I have to base that workflow on the child BC or something. But the workflow, Siebel Workflow works in the context of a business object. So remember the object ID, the input property of a workflow, can always be the row ID of the primary BC of the given business object. So it establishes the context pretty much automatically. So that's great. So we pick a service request as the business object. Let's make sure we pick that, because using the pick list is quite beneficial. And now let's go into the editor. So of course it's blank, and we quickly can put together the workflow with start and end. So what do we put between the start and the end step? So what do we want to do? We want to update the parent. So basically update the last update date, but the last update date is, well, is actually read-only, or you can't really update it in any system fields. So we have to find or create a field that we update when a child is updated, so that the updated timestamp gets updated. And I pick a random field, more or less. Let's find one. You can, of course, think of creating your own field. So here's a field, let's say that, well, the date committed looks like a nice way to just include a timestamp. Okay, of course that's a highly functional field, which triggers some other stuff, as you can see, customer committed and customer opened. But we can use it as a field where you would probably create a custom field like child update, child last update or something. So that's a date field, and we are just going to use it. So quick jump into Siebel tools to look up the field behind date committed. So that's called commit time. So let's just note this down. And so back to our workflow process where we have that Siebel operation, we can say, okay, update timestamp. And the operation is, of course, an update. And the business component is the primary service request, the parent. We want to update the parent, right? There's a lot of service requests here, so there's the real one. Okay, so we have that. And of course, we need to find the field input argument and use the commit time field. And we can use the expression, and let's just marvel at the nice expression designer. We can find the timestamp function. Okay, so that means it will update the record with the current timestamp in the commit time field. Remember, the commit time field is just an example, and you would probably want to create your own custom field for that purpose. But the question is, how do we recognize the record to update? We don't give any search spec or anything. The reason is because we are going to use runtime events, and the runtime event will populate the object ID automatically. So that's the trick, literally. And runtime events are a great vehicle to trigger the workflow. So the trigger will be a runtime event, and the runtime event of question is based on the child, BC. And now you will see how easy it is to do that. So of course we need some connectors from the start step and to the end step. So that's nice. And that first connector from the start. So start steps, they actually look very much like decision points. So they are skewed, not rectangles, right? And the reason is, not the reason for the shape, it's a coincidence, but the thing is that start steps can have multiple connectors that literally triggering the start. The default one doesn't do anything. So let's change that to condition. And let's say call that UPD action, update action. And so now we can fill in the event, the runtime event details. So the event object type is buscomp, and the event object is the action BC, and that is literally, you could do this for any child business component in that business object. So we of course want to focus on the action here, the activity. And what is a proper event? Probably a post event. So anything with pre is too, well, premature, if you will. Write record, I think, is just great, because whenever new record is written or any change is written, it will update. So you could be more specific, but write record sounds like a good idea for prototyping. So it's a post event, so it will happen after the record was successfully written to the database. So now we have that defined as a condition, which is a triggering condition. It will create a runtime event. So let's save that. And likewise, you could have more than one connector. So let's prove that. So I can draw another connector. Yep. And I could leave it as a default, so I can run that workflow from somewhere else. Or I could just add another condition, different event. We're going to try that later, I think. So let's remove it for now. Okay, so you see there's nothing much really apart from setting up that Siebel operation and the runtime event. Let's make this a little bit more lining up. Well, it doesn't line up. Okay, that's fine. And let's validate the workflow for good measure. 0 tests failed, so that's great. So now I want to test that. And the workflow is ready. So it's not delivered, so it's in my developer workspace. So let's go to the application and find that workspace. There's quite a lot here. It's a goofbox system, so don't worry. And I'm going to open and inspect that workspace. Okay. And now, well, let's find another service request which is really old. Probably this one, sample database. Let's check the last updated. It was, no, that was today. That one is from 2023, so it's definitely old. And here in the activities, there's no activity, so let's create one. Let's call it test1 and save that. We can see the date committed already is set, right, to 7:35. So just a few seconds ago. So that definitely has updated the last update timestamp. Indeed, it has. So any update to the service request will help. You can update any field that is writable at this time. Let's try again. Let's change the status of this activity to scheduled. Watch the date committed. So now it's step off. It will probably save it already. Yeah, it has saved it. 7:36. Okay. Yeah. So there's that. So we have in a few moments, literally. It only took a few minutes to create that workflow with the runtime event. And the question is, would that work on any other child? So let's, for example, let's go for solutions. So that's another child entity, and we want to achieve the same principle. So to update the parent when a child is updated. So let's find the child BC. That's, okay, solution SRPD. Interesting. And let's include that in our workflow, shall we? So let's draw that second connector. Okay, it's already exists because the name thingy. Let's try one more time. Okay, ended up with connector 2 after a refresh. And that connector 2 is not going to be default and not going to be connector 2 any longer. So the different implementation here is to, well, use the associate event here because the solutions are actually many-to-many. So you could use write record, but then the user would have to save the record after association, which is not happening. So associate is the correct event here. And yeah, we have found an acronym for associate that is not offensive. And this one, let's go test it. So we have test record here. Let's notice here 7:46. That's the date committed. Or we could actually remove the date committed, right? So yeah. And let's associate a solution. Let's pick one here. Okay, and you see, as soon as I pick this solution in the child applet, the date committed gets updated, and that of course causes the entire parent record to get an update, last updated on timestamp. Okay, now back to our beautiful workflow. You get the idea that you can, of course, add just keep adding connectors and keep adding for each child record that you want to monitor. So that could, of course, become a little bit unwieldy if you have 20 children. But still, that's a no-code solution you have here right in front of you, and it's just a few minutes to implement. So thank you very much for watching. Take care and bye-bye.